Well, aren't you all chatty now? I'd like to welcome you back for our second day of the International Forum on Intercountry Adoption and Global Surrogacy. And today we're going to focus a little more on the surrogacy bit than on the adoption bit. But again, our hope is that we can talk a lot about some of the things that we have in common, as well as where those topics diverge. So I'd ask Marcy Darnovsky to come up and introduce our keynote speaker first, and we'll ask her to keep her comments to roughly 20 minutes so we have a lot of conversation time afterwards as well. Marcy?
Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to be here on the second day, and the energy is really coursing around the room, so it's a good atmosphere into which to introduce Deepa Venkatachalam, who is from Sama Resource Group for Women in Health based in New Delhi. And those of you who have been involved with surrogacy issues know that Sama has really taken a very important lead role in bringing the complex issues related to surrogacy and transnational surrogacy to women's health advocates, public interest advocates, and scholars, both in India and around the world. So we're very fortunate to have her with us today. Deepa.
Thanks a lot, Marcy. So it's great to be here, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers, particularly Kristen and Marcy, for inviting Sama and giving me this opportunity to speak. And I'm really happy because this room is full of scholarship. I mean, co-travelers, friends, who've been very, they've really inspired a lot of the work that Sama does. So great to be here. And I look forward to kind of providing an overview of, global surrogacy practices, but using the narrative of India, and because that's what we've done. We've done research. Sama has done research and policy advocacy on the issue of assisted reproductive technologies and commercial surrogacy over the last decade. And I hope to, in the next 20 minutes, which is a big challenge, to kind of present before you a kind of a background to, why India is such a big destination. Also bring in voices of surrogates, because unfortunately today surrogates are not usually, or maybe they are and we don't know, are part of meetings and forums such as ours. And I think it's important that their voices are also represented here. I mean, voices that we've kind of engaged with or encountered through our research. And would love to kind of take on some of the questions and for discussions and clarifications after the presentation. So we also have a film screening this evening from 6 to 7. So I had kind of put in some of the snapshots from there, thinking, I didn't know that we're going to have a screening earlier on. So since we have that, I'm just going to skip that and go into the industry. I think I can't see this, so I need my laptop. Okay, so I think all of you are quite well aware that India is a big, big destination for commercial surrogacy, one of the biggest right now in the world. And I think we need to understand it in the context of where India is at, not just for commercial surrogacy, but in the general political economy context of health and tourism, medical tourism. So commercialization of health, medical tourism, and the lack of regulation, and we'll come to that later, have resulted in a flourishing medical market in India. And crossing boundaries, the central role of markets in healthcare in India, almost, I think, 90% of the healthcare is provided by private health sector, by the private health sector. And we only spend about 26% of public health, funding on public health, public health funding. The rest of it is out of pocket. So it's, that is the situation in which this whole thing is located. And the state states' withdrawal from provisioning have facilitated expansion of, and proliferation of assisted reproductive technologies and surrogacy. The reason I keep coming back to ARTs, and that's assisted reproductive technologies, is that surrogacy is located in this larger industry of assisted reproductive technologies. And in India, if you look at the bill or the regulation, which we'll be talking about later, it is the draft bill for regulation of assisted reproductive technologies, and there is no separate bill for surrogacy. So it is located within that framework of assisted reproductive technologies, and I just wanted to state that up front. So ARTs are a recent addition to the list of services that India is selling to the world, and we are selling it because, the government and the state has, taken proactive steps to kind of provide subsidies, to give tax breaks to companies, to providers, to kind of really facilitate this industry. And not just the reproductive fertility industry, but also the tourism industry, but also the medical tourism industry as a whole. So according to the National Commission of Women, there are about 3,000 clinics in India offering surrogacy services. And this is a guesstimate, in the sense that there really is no way of knowing how many clinics we have providing these services. Because we don't have any kind of database so far, there is the Indian Council of Medical Research, which is an apex research body affiliated with which is a state body, has a voluntary registry. And so far, I think there are some 280 odd clinics that have really registered on that. And in India, we're really trying to figure out how best to push some of these mechanisms so that we even have some data. Even before you start looking at issues and looking at what's happening, we don't even know where they are. And some of our research in the past has shown that these are not just located in the larger cities, they also have penetrated into very small towns, and they have some innovative ways of reaching out to people and drawing them in, like camps, medical camps. They have very, very interesting marketing kind of strategies to bring people in. So that is to say that right now there is no information, but this is something that the National Commission has put out as 3,000 clinics, which is quite a number. The fertility industry, again, all these, and yesterday somebody flagged this thing about, I don't know if it was in the smaller groups or in the plenary session, about what is the value of some of these, or what are these numbers and who puts out these numbers. And I think this, similarly, this whole thing of the fertility industry, about the revenue that it brings in, which is about US $1 to $2 billion by 2012, which was like a couple of years ago. And this was put out by the Confederation of Indian Industry. We really don't have, these are estimates that are reported in media, brought out by industry houses, but we really don't know what is the worth or what is the, the revenue that this is bringing in. But this is what they say. There's another estimate which says that it is worth $445 million US per year. That's a big industry. Why is India a favored destination? Before we even go into that, I think one needs to understand the changing nature of women's work and labor in India. And as in many countries across the world, with privatization, liberalization, and all those processes taking place in the last 2 decades, there's been increasing informalization of labor. And it's been shrinking opportunities at work security, labor security, all that has been shrinking. And surrogacy or commercial surrogacy is taking place in this milieu. And increasingly, not just surrogacy, there's sex work, there's bar dancing, and in the subcontinent, Nepal, Bangladesh, there are many other kinds of sexualized and reproductive labor that women are turning to in a context of lack of opportunities to work, or choosing over, for example, domestic work or seasonal garment kind of work, because they feel that this is more productive and provides them better economy. So these are some of the, I was talking about why is India a favored destination. So these are some of the things that favor India. I already talked about state patronage. I talked about how we need to look at it from a political economy context that encourages, and is very willing to bring in foreign capital and outsourcing. And that there has been a change of government, and we expect much more of that to happen now. And there's a lot of, it's comparatively, the costs are much lower in India, and that is why people flock there. There are women who are willing to kind of enter into surrogacy arrangements. There is a possibility. Right now there is no legislation. There is a bill, but there is no law, and it allows for very close monitoring of surrogates. And later on, when I bring in some of the voices, we'll see to what extent this monitoring is allowed. And I think that's one of the big reasons also why people do come to India, and it's very preferred, because you can control and kind of supervise and be in very close contact with the surrogates, know exactly what she's doing and not doing. There's also a shorter waiting time because there's so much of infrastructure and facilities available. And of course, India has always kind of drawn people in for medical tourism, not just reproductive tourism, not just for surrogacy, but we've also had a lot of people coming in for medical tourism. We have the infrastructure, the medical expertise, and still we have extremely poor health outcomes, which is a huge paradox. And like I said, no binding, lack of regulation. I think these players, and who are the players involved, this is very important for the whole the convention, and as far as the convention goes. When we're talking about regulating it or looking at who are the people who are involved in this whole process, there are a range of players. And some of the information that I'm putting out here is based on one qualitative study that we did with surrogates in India, but we were also part of a study which looked at actors, agencies and networks along with Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi and King's College in London. So we tried to map these different actors and medical professionals across countries and how they connect with each other and kind of draw in clientele for surrogacy or ARTs for the fertility industry. So some of these players, for example, the medical professional networks, are actually networks of medical professionals, of doctors. And these are important fora for the doctors, for the clinics, to kind of showcase their work and therefore bring in people from different parts of the world to India. So India gets a lot of people who are of foreign, foreign nationals, as we call it, foreign origin, non-Indian origin, but we also have a large Indian diaspora that comes back to access fertility, ARTs and surrogacy. So the players are a range, and I think that's again very important to understand. Do we categorize them as one? For example, you have surrogacy agents who are in the same socioeconomic category or class as surrogates themselves. That is not very, they're pretty poor, not very rich. Also, you have surrogates who have been surrogates and are then agents to kind of mobilize more surrogates. And they also become caretakers or social workers then who kind of go out and recruit them. Then you have the really large kind of tourism agencies, like this new agency, medical tourism agency called Dr. Z, which is based in Punjab and caters to the whole of North India. Or you have, US-based firms like Planet Hospital, which is well known. You have Surrogacy Abroad, which is a Chicago-based company. And these are really big kind of players. So the range of players is quite diverse. And, starting from surrogates and surrogacy agents who are really not very big, small individuals, to very large corporate players across the world. And I think this has implications when we speak about, who are the players, how do we kind of really look at them, understand them, and even for purposes of the convention. I'm kind of moving fast, and if anyone has any queries, we can kind of take them up later. I'm not kind of going over each. Is that okay? Or yeah. So I'm just going to go into a little bit about surrogates and who are these surrogates, surrogate women in India. And I'm not going into, the profile and how many of them and all. We can kind of talk about that if people are interested to know. But definitely, as you all know, surrogates come from a lower socioeconomic class. We've not really been able to find caste affiliations or to kind of really come up with an analysis based on caste, but definitely class. And there are certain selection criteria that are used for women before they enter surrogacy. One of it, of course, is her ability or fitness to carry the pregnancy, somebody who looks healthy. Demands are also there from specific religion or caste. I mean, so if the commissioning couple say that we want somebody, say, from the Brahmin caste, so in some places up to a lakh of Indian rupees is paid extra to kind of to cater to that demand. So there is, I mean, this, and the reason why I bring up, and then so the whole issue of eugenics does play a part in this. I mean, through advertisements or through screening processes, definitely there is a requirement, selection criteria that kind of keeps out certain people and kind of takes in certain women. And it's also interesting that the kind of women we want for this kind of work, largely women, and in Hindi it says somebody without kadwa swabhav, that's what they say in Hindi, which is somebody who doesn't kind of rebel, not rebellious, is docile, is seemingly respectable. So these are all requirements that providers and agents have said that they kind of screen for taking in, and always so far in our work, and Amrita and others can kind of talk more about it, it's usually been women who are married and with children. But in our sample of, when we did our research, there were also women who were separated. But for the purposes of entering surrogacy, they had to get their husbands back to kind of negotiate with them so that they could get their signatures to enter surrogacy. And they had separated because she was suffering from violence. He was violent and abusive to her. So, there are a lot of these dynamics that one kind of really need to look at and understand. Okay, so recruitment patterns. So again, recruitment can happen at different levels. There are agents in agencies who are actually going out into slum areas or into poorer parts of the city and mobilizing surrogates. Most of the agents are usually people who've had some connection with the healthcare system, mostly private, because all this is largely in the private healthcare in India. Very, very few public health hospitals provide assisted reproductive technologies, and some of them provide surrogacy, but not, it's what they call not for payment. They don't pay the surrogates. So, who are the people who recruit them? So there are people like, I was talking about the agencies, like the large agencies, which also recruit. They also directly recruit surrogates. But you also have the small agents who go out and recruit surrogates. Surrogates themselves who kind of, put out the word that, this is something that you could earn money by or earn money through, and kind of recruit them. And where there are now, increasingly in India, there are now surrogacy hostels in many parts of, in many cities, because there is still a lot of stigma attached, and I'll talk about it, and they prefer to kind of come and stay, and also because it's easier to monitor them and to supervise them when they're in a particular place rather than if they're in their own homes. So I'll kind of come to that later. But there's, again, who are the people recruiting? Again, if we want to kind of look at how do we kind of regulate, understand how this whole thing works, there's a range of people who are doing it. I just wanted to also talk about this very interesting situation in Punjab that we came across. The connection between religious institutions and infertility and surrogacy. So in India, and I don't know if it's the same across in other countries of the world, but in India, infertility creates such a deep-rooted stigma for women and has great implications for their health and their lives. It's often, kind of religion and kind of turning to God and religion are not uncommon at all. And in Punjab, we came across this religious institution which was started several years ago, which where a couple, the story goes that the couple who went there who couldn't conceive, and they were kind of blessed by the so-called person there, and she was able to conceive. And thereafter, that place was known or understood as a place that you went to if you could not conceive. And now, the son of that original, whatever, God, man or whoever he was, has started an infertility clinic and also provides surrogacy services. And so people come there because there is also this belief that, it's a special place, and it's called, they refer to it as blessed treatment because it's blessed according to them, and you definitely, you will conceive. And it's also interesting about capital flows, when we talk about capital flows, that they're expected to come back if they conceive, and which is almost a surety according to the clinic, and contribute some money back into the clinic or the larger religious institution, which is really not very separable, but to kind of put in some money into it. So it's really interesting how these work. Also, given the large diaspora of Indian from Punjab living abroad in Canada and UK, you have these religious camps that take place in different parts of the world. They're called deras. And a lot of people are kind of told about the clinics and the facilities they offer, and the whole marketing that they do is through these deras in Canada, in UK, amongst the diaspora. So it's really interesting, how they do it. This is of course about recruiting surrogates. I'm talking about commissioning parents, but also the really interesting links between, some of, religious institutions and the tourism industry. Okay, so I'm kind of moving into what motivates women and what has motivated women to kind of come into this, to kind of enter surrogacy. And largely it's been employment, like I said, struggles to run households, and they've talked about no other option of providing such a large sum of, no other option that provides them such a large sum of money at one go. In surrogacy, you get paid, the least that a woman has got paid that we came across was ₹1,00,000. How much is ₹1,00,000 in dollars? $2,000? Yeah, about $2,000. And I think the maximum we came across, and this was done about a couple of years ago, the maximum we came across was about $8,000. That was what she was paid. That's what they were paid. Minimum was 2 and maximum was about 8. So, even that is a lot of money for a lot of women. So $2,000 at one go is something that they wouldn't otherwise get from any other work that they did. So that was one reason they were giving. They had several responsibilities, of paying off debts and to save up for their children because they didn't seem to have any other options of kind of supporting their education or health costs. Like I said, we have a huge private kind of out-of-pocket expenditure for healthcare, and a lot of people going below poverty lines in India because of the cost of healthcare. So a lot of things that kind of caused them to come into this. They felt that this was a better option than domestic work or factory work. Not all of them. I'm talking about some of them who felt, and these are like different articulations of why they came in, entered surrogacy. And they really felt that this was not immoral. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong in what we're doing. We are helping a childless couple to kind of have a child. And it's a great thing to do. and hence, it's a good thing to do. It's a noble thing to do. It's not immoral at all. So we kind of would like to, and I'll come to the immoral part later as to where the immorality of it comes in and why it's kind of perceived in that sense. Then also, I think the motivation is also because of the kind of persistence that you see agents and agencies playing. I mean, they're quite persistent because it's not that easy to access surrogates. And there is and I think the demand is much more. Yesterday we were just talking about what is the reason. I mean, there are a lot of people coming to India for surrogacy. They do want to and need to kind of get more surrogates for the industry, but they're not able to access. So also the agents and agencies and the clinics are constantly trying to mobilize, negotiate, and they are the ones who say, because there are perceptions that this might be, maybe this is, how does surrogacy happen? Is it do I need to sleep with someone? There are all those issues and lack of information or lack of knowledge. So kind of assuring, reassuring, all that role is played by these small agents who kind of recruit them. So over here, you see, I've just put out some voices here of surrogates saying why they are wanting to enter surrogacy. Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
We'll put it up on the movie.
I'm so sorry. I'm so used to using. That's funny. Okay, so y'all can. I'll just kind of you can put it up on Google or something, and yeah. So okay. So these are some more, reasons. Surrogates, it's not like someone comes to the surrogates and they immediately say yes to it. There are dilemmas, there are concerns, there are questions in their minds, and they wonder whether, and they are confused, should we, shouldn't we? And of course there's motivation, economic motivations, financial motivations, but there's also, like I said, the agents playing an important role. And of course, where when they are told that it's like, it's not something that is immoral, it's not wrong, and you can do this, and it'll get you so much money. It's also a very noble deed, which I was talking about. Then they kind of are willing to go for it. Why isn't this changing? Okay. So this is, I'm just going to talk a little bit about medicalization. I'm done. I'm over 25 minutes. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do then is really kind of skip some of this, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about very quickly go over this. Give me 5 minutes, and I'll go over this. Okay. Just wanted to say that there are several implications medically for women who undergo ARTs and also for surrogates. One of it, and one or two of them are, for example, yesterday during the surrogacy track, we did speak about PGD and the use of PGD for both sex selection, but also to ensure that there are no kind of disabilities that could be possible in the child. Ultimately, any surrogacy arrangement is looking at the end product, which is the child. So all they want is a healthy child, at the end, because there's so much money being paid and there's a transaction there. And if you don't have that child, whether it is for the clinics or for the surrogates, it's a waste of time and effort. So that is the ultimate kind of objective. And the other thing is this controlled kind of, like C-sections, where they try to coincide the coming of parents from abroad to be there because they want to be there during the delivery. So they time it so that, you know, the C-section is done at the time that they are there. So these are things that have caused, you know, issues, and it's not necessary that for example, in our research, there was a woman who was ready to kind of deliver, but they kind of held on and waited, and it can have very serious kind of implications for her health. But they waited till the parents arrived, and, you know, it kind of so that they could be there for the birth. The other thing is breastfeeding, and in India, as of now, no surrogate is allowed. I mean, from the samples that we've spoken to, the women we've spoken to, they're not allowed to breastfeed the child at all. And they are given injections prior to and during, I mean, the last period of pregnancy so that they don't start lactating, and they're not. And this is all because they don't want her to form a bond with the child, because they feel through breastfeeding there will be a bonding, and you know, that will cause issues for relinquishment or giving up of the child. And there is right now no clarity, there's no services, there's no kind of facilities available for her post delivery. I mean, after that, and you'll see it in the film later today, the doctor says that once she has delivered, it's all done, and we're done with her. I mean, she can leave. I mean, if there are any longer term health implications, there's really no one looking at those or addressing those. Nobody's responsible for that. Okay. I'm just going to go into, so I'm not talking about relinquishment in much detail. There are several issues, and we can probably talk about that later. This is, I mean, just to show that it's still very stigmatized, and all the women who are wearing these masks, and it's a very, I mean, familiar photo for most people who kind of looked at surrogacy issues. This is a hospital in Gujarat, and the women with the masks are actually women going in for surrogacy. And I'll just go to the regulation. Just a couple of minutes to say that in India right now we have, so since 2005 we've had several processes. In 2005 we had a guideline which never, I mean, it was a guideline, nothing happened about it. 2008 we had a bill, and there were several issues with the bill, and we've been engaged with that and trying to inform the bill. It never went to, so it has to get passed in Parliament, never happened. 2010 again, there was a new draft, and we've been trying to engage with that, and it's really at status quo, and nothing has happened. But in 2012, there was a Ministry of Home Affairs notice, and this has a lot of relevance for probably the convention and for transnational surrogacy. This talks about foreign couples coming to India for surrogacy, and it puts out certain kind of mandates that they need to, so they need to have pre-permission. They need to bring a letter from their country saying that surrogacy is allowed in their country, and that once the child is born, the child will be accepted, and as they will be, they will accept the couple as biological parents, whatever that means, of the child. But basically that the child will be accepted, and the country will give kind of a permission saying we allow surrogacy in our country, and this couple can come back with the child. So there are several kind of details to this and to the regulatory kind of the bill, which I obviously have. I don't have time to talk about in detail, but I'd be happy to kind of respond to any questions. And thank you so much.
Thanks, and you can stay here for questions. Yeah, we can also put, we've already had some requests to put up the keynote speakers' presentations on Moodle, so we'll do that. I'll give one mic to you. And Hannah's got her hand up right there. You can give it to her, and then I'll... There's one up behind you first, and then she can pass it to you.
Can I go first? Can I? Hi, thank you so much. That was really informative, and I learned a great deal. And I just wanted to pick up on that last point you made about the new Ministry of Home Affairs guidelines that had come in 2012, saying that foreign couples now have to get a medical visa rather than a tourist visa, and they have to jump through these hurdles to do so. And one of which is they have to be heterosexual married couples for 2 years, and the other one is they have to have this letter saying their country permits surrogacy. I just wondered if you have any information on how that's affected the market in India, because from what we understand, some of the receiving countries, so the countries where these people live, aren't able to give those letters because obviously they prohibit surrogacy, and they, in some situations, can't give the parents the ability to come back with the child. Also, obviously, same-sex couples, it seems, can no longer get the right visa to come in, and single persons. So we had understood that maybe it means that the market, if I can use that in inverted commas, in India is shrinking because of that. And I just wondered what you've seen on the ground in India. And I just wanted to say also that I completely agree that it is an interesting embryonic form of cooperation between countries which could feed into our work.
Yeah. Thanks. So I don't know if there's any evidence, though Daisy was mentioning something about visiting Bombay, and she can probably share about that. But I mean, the Ministry of Home Affairs thing came out in 2012, and I think it would be really interesting for some of us now to track what is happening but from what we hear, the thing is that a lot of the clinics will resist from saying that the market is going down. That's been part of the thing, saying that it's going up, up, and up. And I think maybe when we speak to women on the ground, or like surrogates, or other agents on the ground, we might get a better sense. And I think Daisy's done that recently, and we were just talking about it the other day, and she could probably share about that. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lilian Mwanda. I'm from Uganda, and I'm a lawyer. So I thank you so very much for a very enlightening presentation. I must say, I read about surrogacy in passing some time back, 2 decades ago, and this has been very informative to me. Now, from all the presentation, pardon me if I missed it, but
I'm sorry, I think that you must have missed a lot, because I was obviously
no, I'm saying, I'm sorry, from the question I'm going to ask, I'm sorry if I missed the point that I'm going to ask about. But all I've heard is about the people that want a baby, the childless couple, and the person that is going to hold the baby for them for quite some time, and then have the baby delivered. I've not heard anything about this baby and what their interests and their rights would be. Because for us in Uganda, our constitution provides that a child has a right to parentage and to their background. Now, in this, where is this child born? Is it born by the surrogate parent, or is it born by the people that planted the seed into the surrogate parent? And therefore, who do they call a parent? Much as they are not supposed to be breastfed by this mother, so as not to bond. But naturally, they have grown up into the tummy of this lady, and most probably bonded there scientifically and naturally. So who is this child's parent? What about their rights of parentage? Thank you.
I think you've pretty much hit the nail on the head, and we've just started conversations yesterday about motherhood. And I think it raises questions about plurality of kinship and how we look at relationships, at mothers. There could be 3 mothers in this situation. It could be a social mother, genetic mother, gestational mother. I mean, I'm talking about theoretically and conceptually, but when it comes to the law, how do we kind of really kind of create these pluralities? And that's something that we started speaking about yesterday and discussing, and I think the surrogacy track will talk much more about that. In India, only gestational surrogacy is allowed, which means that the surrogate herself does not contribute any genetic material. And it's really interesting because the way it's kind of seen is that her carrying that child for 9 months is not mother enough or motherhood enough. And whereas genetic material somewhere is valued higher. And it's more interesting because when you have women going in for IVF, they are told that, okay, even if the gametes are from donors, they are said, you are the person who carries this child for 9 months, so you are the mother. So it's really interesting how industry kind of plays and negotiates these relationships and kinships. And so what, as far as the child is concerned, legally right now, the commissioning parents are the parents of the child, according to the bill in India. But the bill is not yet a law, and I think on other levels, I think it's very important for us to discuss, especially vis-a-vis the convention, as to how we could kind of really take this conversation forward. What do we recommend? How do we look at this whole issue of motherhood, pluralities of kinship? Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. You will be after me. My name is Margot Kroet. I work with Wereldkinderen. I was interested by your whole story, of course, but you were also talking about the amount paid to these poor women, between $2,000 and $8,000. I was interested in the practice, how this works, because is she already paid at the beginning? Is she paid halfway apart? How does this work? And there were contradictory things in your story about how open it is, because there were pictures that the women were masked, and from the other side it seems it is respected. It is something normal between marks. So I would like to hear a bit more about the context of the payment and the respect for the women for what they do.
Yeah. So on the first question about the payment, payment is basically, as things stand now, the bill that exists, and which is not a law but is still followed because it's convenient, the payment has been 25% before or through the process of pregnancy and 75% at the end. And it's really interesting that this is the 2010 draft of the regulation, and in 2008, it was the other way around. It was 75% before and 25% at the end. So we've been really at loggerheads with the government trying to say, why have you changed this whole thing? But there is a lot of pressure from the medical lobbies to ensure that the maximum payment is at the end, so that there is still control over the payment, which means that you have some control over the surrogate. And it's also in some ways, therefore, really looking at the child at the end of the thing as a product that kind of is what the payment is for. It's not for the labor that she's kind of really putting in those 9 months. It's not about that. It's about that child that is born at the end, and you give that 75% at the end. So it's very problematic, and we are really trying to see what to do. We've been putting a lot of pressure to change some of these things, but it hasn't really worked very well so far, despite our constant efforts, and hopefully maybe there would be some change in the future. On the second point, and I think I just really sorry that I kind of mistimed my entire presentation, but the thing on stigma, and I was saying that it is highly stigmatized. It continues to be stigmatized. At least in the research that we've done, we've seen that women don't even tell their own family most of the times, I remember one instance where in Punjab, what they say is that, yes, this is our own child. And then they go in for delivery and they say that, oftentimes that we had a stillbirth or the child died. and the child is actually given away. And I remember this really interesting instance in Punjab where the women were actually staying at home during the whole process of pregnancy or during the period of pregnancy. And then they came back home and she told everybody, she told the neighbors that it was a stillbirth and she'd given the child away. And there was actually like a, like a memorial that was conducted because they thought that she had lost the child. So there is a lot of stigma and they are not really talking about it even to their families, very difficult. And that invisibilizing itself is a big problem because it is taken advantage of by and kind of really used by some of the agencies, by the clinics, and it's really difficult to access surrogates or speak to them, even if you want to kind of really organize them or get some information out to them. It is quite a challenge. Yeah.
Can I? Thanks a lot, Deepa, for that brilliant overview. I had just a couple of comments. One is that I am so glad that you talked about how surrogacy lies within a whole continuum of other kinds of informal labor markets involving the women's body, especially in the context of India today. And what's so interesting about India is that it is considered a pioneer in sex work organization, and there has been a really dramatic shift in the lens through which sex work has been viewed in India, from viewing it as women who are necessarily trafficked and coerced into it, and hence need to be saved by us, to now the lens being that there are a lot of women who choose to do this, albeit from a very limited set of choices, and the need to validate and respect that choice that they make through policies. But the view about surrogacy in general, internationally and in India, is changing rather slowly, and that surprises me given that India is considered a pioneer in sex work organization. The other thing that connected to this that I wanted to comment on is that a lot of these women actually are doing this over and over again. So in my work over the last decade, I have interacted with women who are doing it for 3 times. So they've become surrogates 3 times. And these are who I've called veteran surrogates in my book. And when I speak to these women about what changes do they visualize in the industry, what would the changes be that would suit them as workers? And the 3 things that they have highlighted, which I thought was so powerful, is one, of course, about the finances of it, the payment involved. And the economics of it is that although a lot of them get in thinking that this would change their lives, at the end of it all, when I revisit them over and over again, they end up being the same thing, domestic workers working in a factory or cleaning the streets. So it's not a lot of money. So one of the things that all these veteran surrogates highlighted for me is that one of their demands, if they ever got on the platform where their voices were heard, would be that they should be able to negotiate. So it should not be just a formal contract, but it should be a interaction with the intended parents, because after all, this is not like any other kind of labor. The second thing that they highlighted was definitely there should be more information, not just internationally, but nationally, about this industry, because then at least the stigma of this labor would be taken away, and the added pressure on them to keep this a secret would be taken away from them, and hence they would not need to stay in hostels. The third thing that the veteran surrogates highlighted for me is that although people who come and interview them, especially the media, international media, think that it's all about the money, the big change that they would like to see in this industry is that the service that they have provided, which is so unusual and unique, should be valued beyond the contract period. And the fact that the relationships are cut off so abruptly is something that they find the most painful about the service that they provide. And my last comment was about, because I recently interviewed the ministry about the regulations, and interestingly, this connects to the question that just came up from there, that the way that the Indian ministry is framing the new regulations is that it is in the best interest of the child. And although we can, so the fact that they want the couples, firstly, they want only couples, they want only married couples to come in, and they want in a way, want only heterosexual married couples to come in, and they frame it always in the language, the ministry frames it in the language of the best interest of the child, because according to them, they make the whole heteronormative assumption that only heterosexual married couples can provide a stable family. So it is very interesting that the Indian government is using the best interest of the child, although I suspect that it's basically just to avoid international legal battles. Thanks.
Yeah. So thanks for your comments, and I think it's really interesting, Amrita, that this whole thing of sex work, and in India actually now the sex work debate has moved so much further, and they're not just talking about rights as sex workers, but also rights to be doing sex work. So that's the kind of debate that's happening in India. But yeah, in India too, the debate around surrogacy is very polarized, and I think it's also interesting that the way surrogacy is often kind of related to or kind of compared with sex work, and what is compared and what doesn't get compared. And I think it's really important for maybe in our tracks to talk about what are the issues that cause discomfort, and what are the issues that there is a lot of discomfort about looking at it as work or labor, and what are the issues that that really prevent us from looking at it, or should we look at it or not. I think there needs to be more conversation around these things. We've been having that in India, but I think we should also have it at different kind of fora and different levels. The other point about what you said about, that was my last slide which I didn't show, was it's true that there are surrogates who want to go back. There are a few who don't also because they've had really bad experiences. But those surrogates who want to do repeat surrogacies, and they continue to get in touch with us and actually asking us for options of where they could contact people because they want to continue doing that. And they are also talking, or they have also talked about similar things that you've raised, about being able to negotiate, about negotiating spaces to be in touch, for example, with the children, which also kind of relates in some way to the point that you raised earlier, and to be able to kind of get to know about what's happening with the child, if the child is okay. Some kind of a connection is what they would like to negotiate. Payment, of course, and also better kind of spaces within hospital facilities where they are, more attention is paid to them within healthcare institutions. So these are some of the things that they definitely raise. And I think it's also very interesting how surrogates perceive risk. And the risk, for example, of medical risks, or, and how they perceive it, given their circumstances, given the structural kind of situations or motivations that kind of got them into entering surrogacy, and how sometimes it is not as seen as risky as maybe some of us kind of perceive it or view it. And so these are some of the things that and they coincide with what you're saying. And we are very troubled by the bill, and the bill it's really interesting that we're happy in a way that it's not kind of turned into a law, because there are a lot of issues with that bill. And it's really interesting that in 2008 there were certain issues that they changed and became a little better, and now again they're probably going back to, there's even this MHA notice which is very different from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare's bill, and they don't have any convergence between them. This very clearly is very kind of heteronormative. You have to be married for 2 years. I mean, what is that? I mean, where does that come from? So there are some of these things that just don't make sense, but yeah, there's need to engage more effectively with them.
I know there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
We're already past 10, and there's 2 people with the mic, so remember the mic has the power. We will have more conversation also throughout and at the end of the day, and especially once Deepa comes back and shows the film, they'll probably raise more questions. So if you can have 2 brief questions, I think Anand, you have one, and then Daisy has one. So if you could keep them brief, and then we also have coffee after this. So we can.
My name is Anand Kaper. I'm an Indian adoptee and Secretary General of United Adoptees International. Thanks for your presentation about surrogacy. And besides the legal framework, in which I think the question arises, who is the mother? That is in my opinion, after the surrogate mother relinquished the child. So they have to relinquish the child. But there are some issues. What if the child, because that's all about it, comes back with questions? And besides the legal framework, there is some ethical and social, emotional part of it. Who decides who is his mother or her mother? And in that case, you can make a link with adoption. You have adoptive parents, but the adoptee has also birth parents. And there are a lot of adoptees who are searching for their roots, for their birth family. And I think that will happen with surrogate children born from surrogacy, and how to deal with that.
Well, thanks, Anand. We had some conversations yesterday around whether it would be similar in the case of surrogacy, or would it not be similar, and also what would be mechanisms, if such a thing. It's not just about the surrogate, then also about donors, gamete donors. So right now, many of them are anonymous, and I think there have been Hollywood films and all kinds of films showing some of these concerns, and also documentaries that have really looked at some of these issues of people, children wanting to come back and find out who donated that gamete, who the father was, or whatever. So there are issues right now. I don't think enough conversations have happened. I don't know if it's happened in other countries. In India, we've really not gone that far. I mean, we've started some of them, and I think there needs to be clarity. And I really am looking forward to having, and it's really great that these questions are coming up, and we are having the discussions that in the tracks, in the global surrogacy tracks, because I think these kind of inform each other as to what have been practices, what could be possible concerns, and maybe help us preempt, or maybe help us kind of develop ways of making sure that that doesn't happen. Right now, there is no, so right now, even in the hospital, the surrogate's name doesn't appear anywhere in India. It doesn't. That's the practice. It should. I know it should, but it doesn't.
India has learned nothing from
the Indian bill. No, but the Indian bill. Probably India takes very long to learn many things. And yeah. So the point is that the bill, for example, does say that the hospital should have records. The surrogate should kind of go into a hospital and register her name. So there are certain things on paper. It's very convenient. Some things are taken and some things are not. And I think that is why we are also trying to see if there can be some regulation that will really regulate, put some standards in place so that this doesn't continue forever. And it's been a long time. I mean, it's been a very long time. Finances? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are certain, it's very selective, right? So, yeah, it is selective because it's being done by certain people with a certain motive in mind. And the surrogate really doesn't have the space, therefore, to negotiate. And that is what Amrita was saying. They say that if I'm doing surrogacy the next time, I would like to have those spaces to negotiate and not necessarily through agents. And I want to do it directly. I want to have that space and the right to do that.
So I'll try to keep my comments and questions very brief. But I just wanted to return to a couple of points that were raised earlier by Amrita and by Hannah at the beginning of the session. Just a comment quickly on what Amrita said. A lot of my research with surrogates also sort of supports what you were saying earlier. And I was particularly interested in the point that you're making about veteran surrogates and the arguments that they're making about the kinds of things that they too would lobby for. We talked about this a bit yesterday in our session, but I wanted to underscore the fact that when we talk about surrogates, we must think about too, not only the women who sign up for surrogacy and become pregnant and complete a pregnancy, but all of the women who sign up for surrogacy have maybe completed a successful pregnancy once and said, this actually didn't change my life in the ways that I thought it was going to. And then they tried to do surrogacy a second time, and a third time and failed, and a fourth time and failed, and said, this isn't working, I'm going to try egg donation, and then would do that several times. And so there's, just to underscore the numbers of women who are participating, but might not necessarily be in our consciousness in terms of how we define who and what a surrogate is. And the other point and question that I wanted to raise in relation to what Hannah mentioned, the impact of the 2012 notice, what I noticed is since I first started doing research in India in 2008 and 2010, everybody talked about how it was all foreigners. And surely that is what's dominating our conversations here in the context, because we're talking about developing a convention in the context of global surrogacy. But when in my most recent trip in January, women and doctors noted that that's shifting. So while foreigners still dominate the market in India, it is ever so slowly shifting in the sense that doctors and women who are surrogates are saying, our business is changing. The stigma, and you talked a bit about stigma, but I do think it's worth discussing how the broader global market is affecting what's happening inside of India. And so I guess my question is thinking about, as we address the global context in developing a convention, right, there are separate trends that are occurring at the global level, but also at the domestic level, that are very much deeply intertwined. And so while surrogates, for example, are saying that in 2008 and 2010 they had no problems finding a doctor who would work with them, now they're telling me that they've heard of clinics that will set up so-called budget surrogacies that are aimed towards local Indian couples where they will get paid a fraction of what they would have gotten paid 4 years ago. And so how might we at the same time address these global concerns that we have, you know, in the context of developing a convention, but then also think about what might the impact of that be in the local context?
Well, it's a rather complex question. I don't know if I'm going to be able to respond to that, directly, immediately. But I think it's worth discussing very important questions. But I just want to say that, from the second point that you raised about the global context and the local context, I didn't really understand that very clearly. As I understand, surrogates, of course, are, doing surrogacy, but they're also doing other kinds of work. So are you saying that they're completely dependent on this and that? I didn't get the point that was being made. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. Yeah, it is occurring. It's been occurring for a while, but the costs have really been an issue for, and in fact, in Indian conversations, the issues of equity have come up. When we talk about cost or when we talk about regulation and, if you're talking about payments to surrogates, how do we kind of really, can we even arrive at some kind of a figure, which is a minimum figure, then does it kind of really, so there are all those kind of conversations that have been happening. But as far as Indian couples or, because in India, there are certain stipulations, the law doesn't, or the bill doesn't allow for queer couples to access it anymore. And so there are people accessing it. And I think maybe what you're saying about them, of that increasing might be true. But I don't know if that has anything to do with the global, reduction in number of couples accessing, if they are kind of connected, really. Let's try pondering that over coffee, shall we? Thank you, Deepa, so much. Thank you so much for a great discussion, and I hope you'll come back with more questions for Deepa. Deepa will have the film at the end after our plenary today, so there'll be some more opportunity for questions about that as well. Right now we have coffee up in the atrium, and we have a session starting at 10:30. So please, if you'd like some coffee, proceed up to the atrium, first floor. And then we'll start our sessions at 10:30. Thank you.